Neil, let me ask you something before you go on. I know we've got this caller from, and I didn't know. I know
Kari Boiter's calling from Washington State.
She got 5 or 10 minutes. I understand she's at some event. She's going to talk about how the Washington impact has been on patients with the legalization. Kari, thanks for calling in. I understand you just have a little bit of time, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Last time we spoke, there was a lot of concerns for the patients in Washington State and what impact the state legalization was going to have. And I know there's been some issues recently legislatively. Please let us know.
Well, as it turns out, at the 11th hour, we were able to slow down and I guess really significantly derail legislation that would have completely stripped away most of the patients' rights. We've worked really hard throughout the session to negotiate with the lawmakers to come up with some sort of regulations that, the patient community could live with, the medical community could live with, the law enforcement community could live with, and the legislative community could live with. And that passed over from the Senate to the House. And when it got to the House, we got caught up in a fight over some tax revenues. And what was interesting is it was all about how the revenue was going to be distributed, and it was tax money that hasn't even come in yet. So they haven't even seen a single cent of this, and this is what actually derailed our legislation that would have given us the regulations that we need to really be in compliance with the new Cole memo that has come out. And that's what the whole push was about, was that we don't have state licensing or state agency oversight for our program right now. And so by, creating a program that does have some of that, some regulations, we expected to come in line with the new Cole memo. And so now that no legislation passed due to this fight over tax money, we're left very vulnerable for another full year because our legislative session is now over and they don't come back until next January. And so what's happened is the U.S. attorney has weighed in since the legislation failed, and she has said that, every single dispensary in the state of Washington is illegal. It's illegal under state law, it's illegal under federal law, and that in line with the Cole memos, he's going to continue to prosecute people. And she mentioned specifically money laundering 3 different times. And so, having been in court and seen how this is used, how the conflict in the law is used, I know that money laundering means depositing money in banks. And so that's really just essentially all of these businesses are at risk. And she made a point of saying, things like money laundering, that's what we're looking at. She didn't talk about firearms. She didn't talk about sales to minors or really any of the other priorities. She specifically said money laundering 3 times. And so that was a pretty big warning shot to us that at any given time, if we're lucky, we might get some DEA letters shutting us down, but potentially some raids could be coming here, even in Western Washington where these dispensaries have been tolerated up until now.
And IRS-type raids instead of DEA that raids then, Kari, is that the suspicion?
It could be anything. It could be ATF, could be IRS, could be DEA, any combination of the 3. And really what she's saying is they're illegal under state law and federal law. And so she's making it really clear that if the states, the state level or the locals, the counties and cities want to take these people on, that they're not legal under state law either. And I think that's I think it's an inaccurate interpretation. Actually, we have multiple state laws that allow for this type of collective garden model, as well as local level regulations. However, she's saying, firing the warning shot that this isn't legal under state or federal level. And so there are definitely individual counties, much like California, where some places respect these dispensaries and other places do not want them there at all. They want them gone, eradicated. And so she's saying, hey, go for it. We may even come help you if you ask us.
And this attorney has been active in Washington State in the past in pursuing marijuana issues. Isn't that correct?
Who are we speaking of specifically? I missed the beginning part of it.
We actually have, much like Michigan, we have 2 U.S. attorneys. So we have one in the Eastern District and one in the Western District. And the one in the Eastern District has definitely been prosecuting, raiding, putting people in prison, from the get-go, and is continuing to do so for as little as 15 plants. Right now are some of the active cases. In Western Washington, where Seattle is and most of the metropolitan area, they've been more friendly. They've kind of taken a blind eye towards these dispensaries opening up. And certainly there's only been a handful of raids here and there, kind of like Colorado, and it's been people who were by and large outside the bounds, although it's tough to really say because I wasn't, taking part in their business model, but very few and far between. And it's been kind of, tacitly condoned. And now she's saying, no, these are all illegal, and at any point in time, if we come and crack down, we warned you.
You're bringing up an important point, which is that unlike Colorado, Washington didn't go through the same kind of super regulated type of system, and it was much more of a not specific regulated medical marijuana program, unlike Colorado. And the suggestion was that what was in existence in Colorado that makes more tolerance by the federal government does not exist here, and you better be careful because these things are not clear and concise, and still opens yourself up to one of these 8 points that we've stressed in the Cole memo as being mandatory for us to leave you alone. Is it something like that?
Yeah, and I think what's really unfortunate is that we the patient community and even the business owners have been trying to get these regulations from the get-go for 15 years now, and we got a wonderful regulated system passed through the legislature in 2011, and it passed with unanimous support from both parties, and it was unfortunately vetoed by our governor, and that's what has left us with this patchwork of pseudo-regulation that doesn't work for the federal government. And so now, for 2 years since then, the legislature has failed to come up with some sort of meaningful regulation and solution, and it's now back on the patients and the providers to try and come up with some way to protect themselves against this, big federal Goliath. And it's not through our fault, it's through the fault of the governor in 2011 with the veto that left us with no regulations at all, because the feds came in at that point and warned that if you pass this regulatory model and you give oversight to these dispensaries, we can come in and raid your state agents. So they basically said, we'll come raid you if you do pass regulation. And now they're saying, well, because you're not regulated, we can come and raid you. And so we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't.
Very, very challenging. So this is the downside of, in most patients, how are most patients acquiring their system now? I mean, their cannabis now.
Well, the collective garden model is a very gray model. So that accounts for all the access points and dispensaries, the commercial model that you would see, but it also accounts for, people pooling resources. So it might be family members who were already growing for themselves, growing for their niece or nephew who's also sick, or maybe it's, in a community where there are no stores, a rural community. It might be a neighbor who's been providing for themselves, also providing for another neighbor with MS. So in smaller, more private and non-commercial cooperatives also, that's what the collective garden kind of encompasses, and that's been part of the hard part in the discussion is that the lawmakers see collective gardens only as the businesses, only as the storefronts. And so all of our cooperative cultivation, which is where most of our donation takes place, and a lot of our innovation and research on a very small scale, they aren't seeing any of that, and they don't even necessarily believe that it exists. And so when they're building this new system, all they're thinking about is businesses. They're not thinking about all the rest that happens, and they wanted to significantly restrict our supply down to 6 plants for a patient to be able to grow themselves. And that's, as you know, in Colorado, they're having that just for any adult to grow. And that would have been our patient amount here. So really, we're only the second state in the nation that has looked at bringing our laws back. Instead of expanding the protections for patients and expanding the access, we've looked at, reining it in and cutting it off. And, and it hasn't been a scalpel approach that we're taking. It's kind of a machete approach. And it's very shocking because it's all in the name of legalization and making this, 502 system work and the legal system work better. And so, it's in one thing, it was Montana is the other state where it's happened, and of course there's no legal mechanism there. They just completely cut it off. Well, here, we're still going to have legal marijuana. People are still going to be able to walk into a store at 21 years old without registering, and they were talking about creating a registry for patients where there isn't one now. And so it's just very strange to see this all happening in the same place where we're leading the nation in legalization at the same time.
How much is that is a factor that they put it in the hands of the Liquor Control Board? How much of their manipulations contributed to the chaos that you've had in implementing the law there?
huge amount of influence they've had. And what they are able to say, well, hey, we'll be able to take care of all the medical marijuana patients because we have producers and processors who say they'll take care of the medical patients. And so, basically what they have is lobbying groups, private interests, corporate interests, who've come in and said, well, we'll take care of these people. Sure, trust us, we'll take care of them. But there's no way they could take care of all of these patients. And all of us who are in this know that it would be impossible. We look at Colorado, we see the shortages, and we know that they couldn't account for all of us and take care of all of us right off the bat with the flip of a switch. But unfortunately, what they see is that competition. They don't want to see unregulated, unlicensed dispensaries. They don't really want to see dispensaries at all because, look, if they can get a corner on that market, that's, of course, financially expedient for them. And so we're really up against it here in a way that I'm not sure any other state is. Even Colorado, because they already had those regulations, they're able to at least point to their medical system and use that as a model, where here we are in the medical arena trying to catch up with the legal system.
Kari, it sure sounds like what Michigan is facing now in the infant stages and what we're looking at in a 2015-2016 issue as well, where the government wants to control the way that they institute a model, for example, provisioning centers. And it's possible that they may take the caregiver participation component away and try and give it to a more commercialized, centralized issue. That would be chaotic here in the state, and it would cause a big row. And we've seen Washington as the bellwether for stuff that we've done in the past. So that's one of the reasons it's great to have you on Planet Green Trees, because you keep us up to date on what's going on in a state that may very well be a mirror for where we're at.
And I think that's why, why I think it's important to come and tell other people in other states what's happening is, as you're modeling your laws, everybody can say in their own state that it's really screwed up. But here, it's a whole different level. If you're looking at a model for a place where you want a medical program to exist and a legal program to exist, look at Colorado. They're doing it right. And the biggest, most important thing is get your medical model regulated and up to speed before you try pushing legalization, because once that genie's out of the bottle, you're never going to be able to have both at the same time. And I think we're proving that in Washington. Unfortunately, I was hoping this wouldn't happen, but it really is.
On the grander scale, do you favor, as the next step, if there was going to be one of the federal government, a rescheduling or some other thing? What's your position in the people who you run with?
Well, I'm a criminal justice reform advocate on a broader level. I just think mass incarceration is a waste of our resources, and there are better ways to rehabilitate people. So I absolutely want to see legalization happen. I would love to see rescheduling or completely descheduling of cannabis. It should go, at least Schedule 3 or below, because Schedule 2 is not where a whole plant medicine belongs. But I would really like to see us look at the whole entire Controlled Substances Act and start thinking about how we are, locking people up and throwing away the key, and whether that really actually helps and benefits them in any meaningful way.
Well, that's always going to be the X factor, I think, of the federal government, where and when and how they're going to act, if at all. Because no matter what we're really talking about, they hold the final trump card. And they could do a number of different things. There's no question about it. We don't know when it's going to happen. But do you fear, especially in the landscape, that you're dealing with a rescheduling, making it a controlled substance, which is less, is going to be a total takeover by, the pharmaceutical companies that kind of dictate much of the direction and policies of medicine and influence the lawmakers?
Yeah, certainly we're all very conscious of Big Pharma and their influence on this discussion, and the fact that, we kind of are contradictory to their tendency to want to pump us full of all these other medications and then more medications to treat us for the side effects of those medications. And so, that's why I say Schedule 3 or below. And really, I would like to see it descheduled. This is a plant. Alcohol's not on the Controlled Substances Act. Tobacco is not on the Controlled Substances Act, certainly both more harmful. There's a lot of other plants that aren't on the Controlled Substances Act, and I don't think cannabis belongs there either.
I always say if they invented alcohol today, it would be put on the Schedule 1 list, I think. You know, really, it's got no medical, you know, it's got no other than to kill, you know, at the end of the day, I think, in the long run. But very few people look back and say, I wish I, you know, drinking more alcohol. It's not one of those things that really is going to help you in the long run. But anyways, digress, and it's not sometimes not even a fair comparison, you know, in terms of the messaging of even suggesting it. But all right, Kari, so I know you only had a limited amount of time. We may have even gone past it, but we always look forward to hearing from you again soon, hopefully. And I appreciate you calling in and sharing that. And it's always important for, as history is being made around the country, that everyone be aware of it and not let the you know, bad mistakes be repeated. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you, as always, keeping your listeners informed on what's happening in Washington and around the country.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. I think we are going to take a little break and then come back with Uncle Pete, who is hopefully in the queue. I'm looking for the number, but if you are there, we're going to get to you. And we're going to rock with Uncle Pete.